Hey, I'm Krista.
Hey, I'm Micah.
Welcome to Bad People.
With good stories.
This is a podcast that seeks to challenge black and white thinking
by exploring the gray.
Welcome back. It's been a solid 6 months since we've been in our little makeshift studio, and we kind of thought we were going to take some holidays. You know, it was around Christmas time that we paused for a little bit, and yes, we're like, okay, let's celebrate Christmas, let's do New Year's, and get back to it. And then life just, I think, continued to happen. I mean, obviously, globally, there's a lot going on.
Yes.
Our neighbors down south, there's a lot going on there. It's really seeped into our Canadian culture. And so it was just, I think both of us sort of, I think, more on our own kind of felt like, oh, we didn't want to add more voices to the conversation of, I think a lot of things were still settling, and yeah, there's just a lot going on. Hey.
Yeah, and we weren't kind of sure where we were going with the podcast too, sort of like figuring that out and like what do we talk about. And I think I don't know, sometimes when there is not anything pressing to talk about, or we're trying to just live life
And kind of take it in. I think both of us sort of looking around and going like, I think we were even unsure if we still wanted to like use our voice. I think, like kind of going like, that's always like personally part of like something that we both like doing, and making sure that we're not silent about things that matter. But also I think when there is so much going on and kind of like a chaotic world that we're living in, and I know personally, kind of like for both of us, maybe more me, there's so much that's like coming at me that to go like, well, I know this feels wrong and seems wrong, but I really just need to take time to like figure out what I actually think about it. And even like we talk a lot about how things are interacting with like our somatic experience, like in our body, and how does that sit with us. So even like that sort of learning to listen first, feel things, move through things, and then seeing that like maybe that's then the time to speak up.
Yeah, I think it's good that we're always discussing like, should we continue or should we not, like, and just it's a tricky thing to know, I don't know, when to speak, because on the one hand I think it's a good thing to just use your voice and speak, and it can be really good to do that and really like strengthening for your own self. Yeah. And then on the other hand is that, there are just so many voices. There's so many things to listen to out there, so many things to read, and with social media and like the internet and just the way the world works at the moment, like we're constantly inundated with stuff. And I think for us, we were chatting the other day about like seasons, and just the fact that the earth naturally goes through like a season of producing and growing things, and then goes through a whole season of just like kind of withdrawal, right? And like silence and reflection almost. And so I'm a big believer of those kinds of rhythms of like, and also just because I do like to think, and I like to think about, even communication, like how we're speaking and what we're saying. But even, there's a lot going on in the world, and it's confusing. For me, we talked about this, like for me, I'm not a very politically inclined person, but here, like at this time in the history of the world, I guess, with all the stuff going on in the United States, like that's been very
Well, it's a hot topic for sure.
for a lot of places, like for the globe, really. Just what is happening in America is kind of like, which is an interesting thing, I think.
It's a zoo, like a circus down, like with constantly you're inundated with like another sort of like, what? This is actually happening? Yeah.
So there was that, like the whole political thing, and then also just lots going on in life too that we kind of needed to give focus to, and also take a break. I think taking a break was good from just like being on social media, and I don't know.
I think it's interesting because we've said from the beginning we want the podcast to serve us, not we serve it. And I think that's something that our culture really struggles with all the time, where you just push harder, you hustle harder, girl boss this or whatever. And it's such like a driving force that, again, there's not a lot of wisdom that gets exercised when you're like, whoa, I'm feeling this.
Yeah, I just need to take a minute and rest and yeah.
And where you kind of like demand yourself to have answers before you've actually taken the time, again, to either listen or to feel it, or just to like, yeah, observe, even like, how is everybody interacting with this? Or even what's actually beneath all of this? I think that's interesting when you think about politics and, again, the tribalism that's happening, or people that are like, well, you're in this camp, so that this means this, this, and this.
Yeah. So many assumptions are being made at the moment about everything and everyone.
Yes, and, like, again, high stakes stuff, lots of fear-based things, and then when you're like, "Okay, but wait, what is actually happening to people? What is actually going on here? This isn't just as it appears." This is really, again, to invoke kind of like these, like, base level responses in culture or in people themselves, and then to go, "Oh, are we being manipulated, or are we" yeah, just again, to take that step back and go, "Okay, let's breathe. Let's" yeah, absorb.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we're both passionate about like mental health too, right? And like first and foremost, we need to look after ourselves and sometimes that means just yeah, stopping the production and the like posting and the like I need to have an opinion here or something like that. So, I don't know, the rest was it's been good.
I know I took part of that. I think we've both been pretty open about, like, you struggle with anxiety and I struggle with depression, whether it's circumstantial or not. Like, I mean, life is, it's just a lot for everybody.
Yeah.
And I know I had an opportunity to do like some somatic therapy on top of like talk therapy, which was also good to have the space to, again, yeah, maybe like that input, like, "Oh, I'm gonna nurture myself," or take those moments to, yeah, really tend to maybe not my soul, but yeah, even my body, like, which isn't always really talked about. It's mental health is so, like, in the mind, and where so much of where we either hold trauma or we kind of experience things is in our nervous system, and then that's gonna cause us to be, like, more tense or, dysregulated.
Yeah, it's actually all connected.
And that's something that I think we don't remember enough when we're kind of faced with either, globally kind of like these things that you're like, oh, I have to have an opinion on and I have to like contend with, or we have our local election, or, you have something come up in your life and then kind of going, okay, right, I'm going to feel this in a big way. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just a reminder to everybody, like, take care of yourself. I mean, we hear that lots. It's not selfish or whatever, but it really isn't. And it definitely takes a bit for like the inventory too, right? To like sit there. I know you've kind of done a bit more work in meditation, kind of a little bit.
Bit here and there. Not currently, but I think I try to, I guess, yeah. I think for me, my big thing is like being present in whatever I'm doing. So like with the kids and just day-to-day stuff. Like I try to, yeah. Being on the phone is always a struggle. Like so I think having a podcast and doing posts and like thinking about that, like that's also something I like to give thought to, but it can quickly just take up so much time and so much attention. Yeah. And just so like yeah, I try to create lots of spaces in the day where I'm just like not on my phone. And I don't always succeed, but I think for me that not being on the phone is just of course the response and to that is sort of automatically like for me to be present with whatever I'm doing. Like at the end of the day it is yeah, it's a weird thing just being sort of like distracted and then not being as soon as that's yeah, away or off or like out of the way. So, I don't know, it's a tension for sure.
Well, and because like we sort of thought through what the theme of today would be, which we're calling this episode Bad Thoughts. And sometimes I think the phone can serve to for sure, to distract. Like, and when you're trying to be present in the moment, I mean, with the kids, maybe it's a bit different because your mind maybe won't wander to like some of these thoughts that are more difficult to process. But definitely having those moments of quiet or meditation or trying to be present even with yourself and then kind of going like, "Oh my," like sometimes wavering between like an existential crisis to like, "Crap, what do I do in this economy?" to, "Oh no, maybe relational issues or how to parent properly." There's so much to think about, and I think part of the bad thoughts kind of topic would be like, what are we afraid to think about? Where did we used to have certainty? I mean, that's been a big thing as our faith has unraveled to go, oh, we used to have certainty about like whether it's life after death or, kind of like a container to how to do life properly and how to be good people or how to, I don't know, interact with other people, like all of those things. And then to really go like, oh, shoot, where is that? Yeah, where do we land? How does our mind rest? Especially like for you with anxiety, me with depression, like how do I not spiral into like, oh, shoot, I don't have hope anymore. And for you, like because it's rumination probably for both of us, right?
And that's where I find that the social media and being on a phone actually amplifies all of that, like fragmented thinking and and can just trigger like out of the blue when you're scrolling or see something. Like for me that can be how it often works, or even just all the bad news that you come across on there can be like this the doom scrolling, right? Like that definitely ends up translating into your body somehow, and yeah, you just kind of don't feel at ease. Or yeah, so for me, it's always a constant, like, what is actually weighing up? Like, what is in my control, like, realistically, to care about even? And what is actually way beyond my control or something that I just want to, like, learn more about? And yeah, and that's a constant learning curve is like, what can I have an impact in? Or and but then also, like, just living a life, like, being a parent, having a school schedule, thinking about income, like, just the daily demands are often all you can really deal with, right? So I also it's just such a tension because I think in this climate, there's so much pressure to have opinions about things and to care about things that are happening in the world. And I think maybe that's a result of having more of a global access through the internet and social media. And so,
Well, and it's a way of like virtue signaling in some regard. Like, I think it's interesting again when we're like thinking about how to be good people in this world. Good people are informed, good people are the right side of history, good people speak up and say things and land in the right spot, right? Whereas, I mean, we've talked a bit about, yeah, the Israeli Palestinian conflict, and, that gets a ton of attention. And if you're on the wrong side of that, well, politically, that means that you're this way or that way. And then you brought up a really good point. Well, then why aren't we spending any time focusing on what's going on in Sudan or other places in the world, right? And it's like, are we potentially being manipulated to care about one thing over another to then again cause exhaustion in our own personal lives? Like, and can you really land on a yes or no, or this is right or this is wrong when you're not there? You do not have all the information. Like, there's a constant struggle with like, where are you getting your news from? How do you even form opinions? And so that's interesting when you consider like the mental toll that we're all like, oh my goodness, we have to have some, we have the luxury of living in North America and therefore, should use what we have to do good. And how do you do that?
I know, right? And I think it's such a good question to ask. And I love that you're kind of always considering that question, I feel. And yeah, but like you had brought up in our conversation the other day, really great point too, when we were talking about this, of it being like things that are politicized, crises and humanitarian situations that are politicized then become sort of like the ones people feel pressure to care about or to like get up in arms about or to have an opinion about. And yeah, when you think about just the reality of the world and that there are so many places that are not benefiting and that are in a state of crisis, like, that's overwhelming. So it's kind of like, and then we're not even thinking about, people in your own country or just people down the street that need help or need us. Like, the scope is just so big. Yeah, I find that overwhelming, and I find it, as a person who's more, like, inclined to creative pursuits and, like, sort of is happy to be oblivious to, like, political things, I feel like there is kind of a pressure to, like, have an opinion and to know things politically.
It's funny because I think you give yourself a little bit of like a bad rep in that, like where you're like, well, I don't know enough, so I can't have an opinion. Or you choose, you're like, I don't want to speak into this. And what I see from you is like more wisdom in the sense that you're like, well, I can't actually know everything there is to know about these two opposing forces, let's say. And so therefore you're like, I don't know that I can fully take a stand on one side or the other and go like, well, this other side is so bad and evil, therefore I've landed in one camp or the other. And I think that's actually, there's a lot of wisdom in that because, yeah, like sometimes you're like, oh, well, I don't know as much. And I'm like, you actually do. Like, I think that is everybody's personal responsibility to do as much as they can to kind of know like a general idea of what's going on, which is
Yeah.
what I see represented in how you kind of tackle things.
Yeah, or maybe it's that the more I do know and learn, the less I'm like, it's just not black and white. It's not like, and who knows how I would act if I was there in that country, like, facing these things, and I just have no idea how I would be, like, yeah, and so
Well, and plus nobody has really like spanned that. I mean, some of these conflicts have gone on for too long. Like, so even how do you, like, I think I mentioned to you that I was having a conversation with somebody who is like Indigenous to Canada. And they were like, I mean, this is definitely taken out of context, but part of, they're like, the only solution is that the Indigenous population in Canada would die off. Like, there is no way to make this right. And that's sort of sometimes the sad reality of these things is that, yeah, for one, outsiders trying to help doesn't always help. And this problem is so complex and so nuanced, which again, then what do you do? And it's like, well, you do better. And like, I think that's where maybe we stand right now is going like, oh, shoot, a lot of us are looking and going like, this is like kind of the time in the world right now that we're facing is like, oh, we've seen this pattern in history before. So are we going to let this all happen again? And I would say, like, part of me would go, I think we're already there. And then going, like, okay, stop pretending this isn't happening. Say, like, we are here. And this is like I mean, this is a very unpopular, and I don't even know if it's founded, but I would say, like, oh, yeah, war seems somewhat imminent, right?
yeah.
Like, and therefore, like, stop putting your head in the sand and going, like, yeah, I don't know that you can get off the track that we're on unless something very extreme happens. And it doesn't seem like anybody's able to do that. So don't pretend like this is anything but what it actually is, which is like a big part of like truth telling that I think we both care about
Yeah.
is like looking at things exactly the way they are and stop pretending that they're anything different than how they are, maybe.
Yeah, and I think maybe my standpoint is, like, how do we know what is real?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I think that's my thing is, like, there I think we were talking about this a bit, but, like, just the feeling of confusion when it comes to politics and when it comes to, like, where should I even go to get to do research, to, like, find things out, and what I feel at the moment a lot of mistrust for most things I read, like, I don't know if I can trust this, and so I kind of like, when there's a trust issue with just the basic things you're reading, like, yeah, you can see how there's just I don't know. For me personally, I'm like, my questions are like, well, how do I get trusted sources and figure out what's, like, actually going on? Because everything I learn is about the state of the world is usually from, yeah, social media or, like, news web pages or and I follow a few like news coverage accounts that give like the left and the right kind of bias to show like this is how the left is kind of covering this and this is how the right is covering it. But yeah, I think that's probably I feel like that's a big part of what people would also be feeling, like either pressure to know and to choose a side or just feeling confused about like where to even begin. And
Which is funny because I think that is the truth of what we're living right now. Like, it's clear that we should be confused because we are constantly being fed like fake news, or, there's some like circus thing that's like, having Trump dressed as like the Pope, or having
AI in the mix too. Fake photos, like, yeah, fake people. Like, yeah, I find just trust is breaking down so much.
so like, or even like Noel, you help me, Yuval Harari. So he's like a historian, like a sociologist, right?
I think so. He's got a lot of things under his belt.
But he's written a few books that really like take apart like the Homo sapiens.
Information networks, yes.
We are where we are, and like, yeah, I can only read, a few chapters of his books at a time because it's so heady. But at the same time, he would speak to the fact that democracy is breaking down. Like, there's such a lack of trust. There's so much misinformation, which if people are feeling confused and feeling like they can't trust, trust is broken down, then you're not wrong. No. Like, sit in that and go like, oh shoot, like don't have personal shame around that, because that is like the collective experience that everybody has right now. And I think that's where it's like, okay, what do you do from there? Like, and I think some people feel ashamed.
Yeah, what do we do about this?
Yeah, feel ashamed for like not knowing, or want to kind of fake their knowledge and then go like, oh, you're so wrong because you're causing this, this, and this to happen. And it's like, well, no, like we're already past that point. And like sometimes when we pretend that we have the answers or that there is some way to solve this giant problem, I think it just kind of puts our head further in the sand, where it's okay to say, shit, this is like all very beyond most of us. And we are far past something, I think, in some ways that we can change on this like collective scale. Now, I think it really comes down to like personal responsibility and what you do in your daily life and how you show up in those, like in your backyard, and what you choose to like, are we still going to be on the bandwagon of like, what do you call that? Where, what's the American dream? Help me. I'm losing my, capitalism. Yeah. Like where we all kind of thought like, oh, we can have like, 2 trips a year and we can all like work hard enough to have our multi-million-dollar homes and our fancy cars, and all of that is possible if we just work harder. And again, that's all breaking down. Like, our economy is not doing well. The more that we want, the more like I think miserable we are. Like, really kind of, I don't know, holding the people close to us, like that is important. And like nurturing and caring for our children is important. Doing good in this world on a very small scale is important. Like, I think that's how we get through stuff like this.
Yeah. So can I ask you a question? Like, with the way things are sort of like, it feels like there's the binaries of like you're either left or you're right. And that has come to Canada as well.
It's getting so polarized. Didn't think it could happen more.
Yes. How do you navigate that kind of pressure, and also like the sort of assumptions you can face personally if you were to answer a certain way and be like, I'm on the left, or like...
Yeah, you've taught me a lot about that. You would post something on social media and then you're like, crap, somebody engaged with that made me think again about this topic that I thought I had more certainty about. And I think like maybe what you would kind of think more as like wavering, I look at that and I'm like, wow, it's really taught me a lot about, yeah, I cannot have assumptions about what is going on in the mind of somebody that I might not quote unquote agree with. Because, for example, like we have these people in power for a reason. Like it didn't just like accidentally happen because we were all collectively manipulated. No, we chose this person. Like we didn't, but like our neighbors did.
Yeah.
And it's
He was voted in.
yeah, like it's a signifier of like the culture and like the time that we live in, that he's in power for the second time.
Yes, and
Or
by he, just in case
yes.
anyone doesn't know, we mean Donald Trump.
Which again, like why Canadians even care is, we've got, we have, that means something for us as Canadians, because there's a lot of fear for us, and like, kind of, there's obviously been threats about, like, a lot of Canadians would be like, just stop worrying about it, but obviously we can't.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, I get the concern, like the worry around being this, kind of sandwiched nation in between, and the way that he's been reported to have been speaking. And
well, and what you see kind of like, there is no due process anymore. It's just like, here's executive, like, it's democracy has broken down, I think, in the States. And I think
so how do you, like, where do you find your news, kind of like, or
it's like,
accounts of what is going on? Like,
that's the interesting thing I feel like lately, which is going to sound super hokey, but it's like almost consuming as much as you can in those like windows that you would allow yourself to, and try to
yes,
like,
when you're in the mental space to like research or read. Yeah.
hey, I'm gonna attempt to hear from like both sides. And then truly, I think the best thing lately is to sit with it on like a personal level, and to also have like what I've learned from you, or even what I've seen with another friend that is like, would be somebody that I don't politically align with, is to know them on a personal level, and then start to see like, right, they are just another human being that thinks that they're seeing things the right way. And then to see like,
Which we all tend to have that
right?
bias.
Yeah. And then to see how it makes me feel in my body. Like, I think we discount that so much because we need, again, our mind makes us want to think like we need certainty and we need systems and structure and order. But really, when something breaks down, it has like a physical like component, like a physiological component to it, where you'll feel a lot of anxiety, or you'll feel like it in your, like in your body, almost in like your gut, your soul, where you're like, this isn't sustainable. This makes me feel awful. Like, I'm sure like materialism, capitalism, like because I was deeply into that, and it was like, there's never enough and you needed to have more. And it always made me feel, if I was being honest, it would make me feel very anxious. And like I never allowed things to penetrate like who I was, or it was always an escape. And that's interesting, as I would say, as I like sit with the information, which is all in my head, and kind of like let it seep down into like the core of my being. That seems
Just
to
allow
be,
yourself to actually process it. Yeah.
and then to go, wait, this isn't like, how you can see something from like a different, like maybe a panned out like scene, like where you get like 50,000 feet instead of like the micro.
Yeah.
And that's helpful too, to go like, oh, this is what's really going on. This isn't really about this. And actually, I can't do much to fix this because it's already so far down the track. So either I'm going to exhaust myself and care about something that I
I
have no
really,
power in.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, I think
But it's hard to know, like,
it is
when to
move and when not to.
Yeah, I think I find for myself, like, I went through a whole lot of sort of deconstructing the ways we can be, like, emotionally manipulated, especially in church. In some church contexts where things get very emotional, and then people are, led to make decisions, or
Because what happens when you're like, your emotions and you get overwhelmed, like with the sensory kind of experience, you lose your critical mind. Right? Which,
not always. Like, I feel like emotions are deeply part of, like, all of our thinking, but to the point where
you
I
have to
don't know.
move through them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they can, you are in a more vulnerable spot when you're, like, feeling emotional. And
Yeah, like if somebody, that's what fear, like when fear is evoked in us, we get the fight or flight. And can you make a rational, like a choice in fight or flight?
Yeah.
No, like you're in survival mode.
Yeah.
Or if you're being manipulated to like, let's say there's beautiful music in the background and it's like somebody's trying to like lull you to make some uninformed or something, right?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the stuff on social media particularly, and maybe this is for better or worse, like, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I do I do tune out a lot to the stuff that is kind of like just an emotional trigger, like it's there particularly like lots of footage of, like, starving children, for instance. Like, that if anyone sees that in person, like, it's horrific, right? There's very few people who I know who see that kinda stuff and are, like, can be unmoved by it.
Yes. Nor should you not. Yeah, right? Yeah.
But I think it's definitely manipulated a lot online to, like, get clicks, to get people riled up about things, and I think for me, it's just a bit the way I sort of tend to cope. Whether this is good or bad, I have no idea. It's the gray, like we talk about. But I kind of feel like I, have to kinda shut off to that and tune out to it because it's like yeah, and there's some posts, like, I always sort of will read the caption or whatever, but I think things that are primarily, like, aimed at your emotions and trying to get an emotional response from you are I would just, like, go deeper with those or, like, question them.
Yeah, like, kind of turn off that instinctual, like, "Oh my goodness," like, "Oh, I my heart broken," and then go like, "Wait a second. This was clearly put out there for that reaction," and go, "Okay, well, good, you got that reaction. Now I'm not going to just, like, act based on that reaction," because that's manipula like, when somebody does something for an intention, you're like, "Okay, well, you got that, but then what now?"
Yeah,
Right.
and, I mean, like, you hear enough about scams and the ways people can be manipulated when they're emotional is, like, a good thing to be aware of because that is how a lot of marketing works also. It targets your emotions, and I know, like, this brings up even a story for me, I think I won't mind Grant won't mind me sharing this, but he went on, like, a trip back when we were first married, I think, to, like, Indonesia, and that's a city that's very, like there's complete poverty one side of the street, and then, like, affluence and wealth, like, just across the street. Yeah, and so when that's, like, in front of you in person, like, it does actually mess with you, like, a lot, and I think, knowing that about human nature, like, yeah, he got emotional just, like, retelling that to me once he was back in Australia, the fact that he saw kids kind of, like, on the street and they were literally starving, and then across the road, they're staying in this, like, really wealthy hotel and these things coexist. And when it's in your face like that, it just there's something about it that just feels deeply wrong. Like, why are these 2 things existing on the same street? Like, why isn't the wealthy people why aren't they doing something about these people? And, um, yeah, like, that messes you up in real life. So
Funny and like, he just saw behind like, that is true of the world we live in.
right.
And he just saw it in that moment blatantly, whereas in North America, we hide it.
Yeah. I think it's just like and then I've heard a few people who have been missionaries in those places and then come back to the West, where we're obviously very, like, privileged and wealthy, and then the guilt and shame they feel just in integrating back into life here where there's so much privilege but, like, that's a real thing. That's a thing that there's so many things we just don't take into account when we're, like, seeing these snap things on Instagram, like, that I just for me, I'm leaning more and more towards, like, I can't be on here for, like, my sources. So, at the moment, I'm trying to, like, read books and follow a whole train of thought, like, through to the end and a complete, like, actual idea of an ideology that someone's presenting rather than just, like, these little but then also, yeah, it's difficult when it comes to news because news that is a really it's the primary way people are getting it now.
Problem is, it's just so fast paced and it's so global, right? So it is, again, if people feel overwhelmed and feel like they don't know what to think or say, yeah, obviously, because it's not supposed to be like this. We are supposed to have these smaller communities where you like one bad thing happens a day or a couple, and then like that's what you care about and that's what you can do something about, right? Whereas, yeah, and we're so fast paced and technology just makes it worse and worse. So, yeah, how do you? And how can you possibly fix problems that are bigger than just yourself and your smaller community? Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, trying to figure that, like, that's part of why we want to keep talking is because you and I just have these struggles with, like, reality and the world we live in, and I think it's so good to just have honest conversation around them, like, what are you doing?
I think a lot of people, well, for one, like, it's hilarious to be like, "Yeah, we have a podcast." Like, everybody has a podcast, and it's definitely kind of like the cringy, embarrassing thing, right, to kind of engage with, but at the same time, some people would assume you have a podcast because you have, like, we were talking about a podcast you just engaged with that's new to you that kind of in some ways is claiming to have like answers to a problem, sort of, or at least they walk through something and they're like, this is how we did it and this is how you could do it too. And it's like, which is great, like no diss to that. But what if we can cultivate a space where it is about conversation? It's about further like feeling and thought about things that maybe don't have a conclusion. Like, people say you never arrive. People say that the older you get, the less you know.
Which
So
is so true in my
yes,
opinion.
right? Like, we both feel that, and we're only, like, halfway through our life. So, maybe that's good to just, again, like, we were like, "Oh, we don't have answers," but that has never been the point of this space.
Yeah.
It is to have difficult conversations, to engage in different ways, to,
Without
like
shame of, like, because that is the thing right now where if you don't identify with one political side in particular, like, let's take politics for an example, then there's all these assumptions, and in my mind, it's become a bit like it's very, like, fundamental, like a fundamentalist mentality, whereas, like, it's the same as in my mind, like, thinking that, like, as the evangelical sort of framework, like, that if you don't believe in Jesus, you don't hold to this faith, you don't, like, live your life this way, then sorry, we can't really associate, like, I don't have that much in common with you, or I need to be persuading you the whole time that you need Jesus.
which again is so anchored in this certainty and knowing better and, like, yeah.
And I'm seeing that just, like, reacted out in politics where it's like, well, if you don't believe in like, if you're going for Trump, then sorry, like, you're obviously
Well, this
a
means
depraved
something
human.
about you, right? Like, that's such an yes, an interesting thing, like, well, I can't be friends with those type of people because how could they possibly? And you're like, well, no, 5 minutes ago, you were friends with this person. You are still friends with this person. You guys just happen to have a different view on something. And that's how polarization continues to happen, which is not good, but it's not good for humanity, like, to be like, "Well, I'm just gonna continue to be in," like, to move further and further away from each other because of assumptions about what this means to be this type of person, good and bad, again, binary, but again, with the great divide, like, that's the bit where it's like,
Things are constantly
yeah,
being so divisive, and
when
we're being divided. Yeah.
right, just for things like political ideologies instead of like, how does this person function in their day-to-day life? Like, how do they show up for their children? How do they show up in their workplace? How do they show up as a friend to you? People end up losing their humanity in other people's
Being
eyes.
able to see them as a human.
Yes.
Or to even just rationalize beyond that, like, this person may have, like, why do they have some information I don't? Like, where did they get their information about, like, voting, and why do they believe that that was a worthy vote for them? Like, it's just, like, getting beyond that initial trigger thing and being, like, just having curiosity, which is what we've always wanted to maintain on this podcast. And, like, I myself still, I think, even moving beyond, like, evangelicalism and stuff, I still wanna have curiosity toward people who hold faith.
Yeah.
And I genuinely wanna hear, like, why is working for them or why it's making their life meaningful. But I'm also not I'm, like, I'm my own person, right? I can make up my own mind about things, but I always wanna have that curiosity. Like, yeah, if we're gonna say that we're challenging black and white thinking, I think we constantly have to be looking at ourselves and where that plays out in our lives, which is not an easy task to, like, constantly be doing that work. But I think that's why I love the challenge of this podcast, is because it is something that can kind of hold us accountable to that for ourselves as well, and like be assessing that in our own lives and worldviews.
Well, it's like, it's making, what is it? I think it's Carl Jung again, that's like making the unseen, or until you make the unconscious known, you don't like it. That's sort of the starting point. I'm butchering that whole thought, but like that's the curiosity, trying to like like dig a little deeper, try to go like, what's really at the heart here? How did we end up there? What? And then really doing that to ourselves, which then shows like our bias or our like blind spots. And like in some ways, I think, yeah, I want to say like you're further down the path of like deconstruction than I am in some ways.
I don't know.
And
We're just on different.
different paths.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like sometimes when you're curious about somebody who is not curious back to you, that can be that's a thing.
That is.
Yeah. Where
That
you're
can be
like,
hard.
yeah, where you're like, oh, it's exhausting to hang out with somebody that still has the answers for me. And all I want to know is like, I'm curious about whether it's your faith or your stance on something. And you're like, you're trying to sell me something. You're trying to give me a answer of like a certain answer instead of this is what's worked for me, which is, that's different because that can be, you kind of feel always on guard and like, no, guys, like I've been down that road before and it didn't work, and trust that I really, really like engaged with this thing and that I've had to take that apart in my life, not because I like am evil or
Yeah.
because
It wasn't just flippant.
totally. And I'm not bad because I can't engage in that anymore. Right. And that's like, I think, again, more of like a black and white kind of worldview. But yeah, that is tricky.
That is tricky to navigate. Yeah. And I've never had to like, it's kind of just that like personal discernment, right? With like relationships as well. Cause yeah, I think that's hard when like you are changing as a person or you're on the journey of sort of like evolution. And I think it's hard for, you run into people where that change sort of, there's no space for it.
Yeah.
They just want to keep you in the
or
way
it
they've
does
always known
something
you.
to them. Like that's a whole thing where
That's what it's really about.
yeah, like it disrupts their, like they're so certain and we all used to be so certain together. And then when you
That was
move,
comfort too.
of course,
Yeah.
like, yeah, because it's exhausting to be a human and kind of like in some ways look at our fragility and our lack of knowing and then being inundated with like all this information and stress all the time. Like that's exhausting. However, that is the call of being a human. Like whether, earlier in our evolutionary kind of track with just like the hunter gatherer, like you were always like imminent death was sort of upon you.
Yeah.
And you coped with that. Now we were able to numb so much of that, like with, modern medicine or just comfort, like, indoor plumbing and all of that. But that hasn't gone away. And I think we like to pretend that it has. And that's where it's like, no, don't turn off your brain. Like you have to engage in these ways. But it's the illusion, I think, of certainty that really makes people, because it's like we all bought into that. And then we're like, at least for us, we're like, that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah,
and it is tiring.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think like that's something that isn't as much talked about too, is having that certainty, and the breakdown of that is like a process of, it is kind of trauma to have that broken down. And so I think that's where for me I absolutely was in lots of places where the breakdown of that felt like so scary and so like, yeah, depressing. I was in lots, like I felt just kind of empty and lost for a period of my life there where I was like, this is kind of hell. Like so I get the pushback to it, like not wanting to be in that space of reckoning with it. But I think, I don't know, it's
Again, we're like,
it's a personal thing. Like
and we're on the journey of like, that's where we find ourselves, where we're like, we're okay to engage in this way.
Right. And I think finding all the other people who have engaged that way too and who are there with us, like that's what helps me too, is just trying to find the other people there in that place.
I think the exhausting part is when you're like, "Shoot, I'm alone with a lot of people that don't see or haven't experienced the world the same way that I have." And therefore, they keep giving like medicine to an ailment that it's not working. And I'm like, "This doesn't work." And that's exhausting to explain all the time, where it is just easier to go, "Okay, uh-huh, yeah, let me try that. Let me take that." But again, that's a lie. And so integrity would say that you have to speak up and just say quietly, like, "I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me," which that can be affronting. That's just that's a difficult thing.
Right. It's another form of, like, letting go of the people-pleasing element and, yeah, just, I don't know, having everything fit nicely.
Yes. Which is funny, like, I think I posted that recently where it's like, sometimes you have to speak up, not because it will change the person, but because if you don't, it changes you. And even, like, understanding, like, it doesn't need to be this, like, loud fight. It's just like, "No, I don't agree with that." And like, I had an experience recently where I'm like, "I can't actually have you rewrite the narrative on this." Like, I don't mean to cause you to, like, walk away or whatever, but that's wrong, and I'm not gonna just sit here and have you tell me, like, that this is what happened when it's not. Like, absolutely not. And I'm not trying to be, like, any type of way other than just stating the truth, which is, again, people live in different worlds too, right? Yeah, so
And I think that, I don't know, that for me touches on as well a lot of, like, your own sort of, um, like, understanding your own identity and strength and power. Because, like, if you don't see and believe that you can make up your own mind about things and that, yes, people can be persuasive, people can be very convincing, but everywhere you look, there will be arguments for something, for this, for that. Like, and I think the more, which is probably where that saying comes from, like, the older you get, the less you know. Like, you just I have kept coming back to the fact that, wow, I'm the only one who can make up my mind, and letting other people, yeah, for a long time, I sort of let other people do that for me.
they kind of hijack that for you with a lot of charisma or confidence, which is interesting because sometimes the most, like, I don't know, what looks the best on the outside actually is just a mask for something really rotten on the inside that actually has no clue any more than you do. And that's, like, very interesting to be like, "Oh, I am being swayed," or yeah, kind of, like, encouraged to move in a direction that yeah, like, "Nope, this actually."
Right. Or I think the other side of it is that you sort of feel pressure to defer to certain people's opinion and expertise because they either have, like, the backing of their degrees and, like, academic achievements, or because they hold a position in a something that's, like, there's power involved, and so their opinion matters more or whatever. But I think being able to see back again to the humanity of every person, like, you're just a human, you've got all this experience, and I'm gonna read what you have to say or, like, listen to what you have to say. But again, that doesn't mean I can't think critically here about you and about your arguments or about your ideas. And I think lots of us forget that, like, that we actually have the power to think critically and to not put people on pedestals just because they are saying this, this, and this, or because they have all these dazzling credentials. Like, that doesn't, yes, expertise matters, but also people are just human too. And we're all constantly professing, like, ideas and ideologies and arguments for things.
And what can you really know? Like, because, lots of times people are like, "Oh, they're so book smart, but they have not lived a day in their life," or yeah, so I think that
Or they can't, like, cook a meal or do a practical thing.
but that's like and then also what is their agenda? Like, is their agenda power, money, influence, like, status? Yeah, and or is it for common good? Because I think everybody like, I would say we have an agenda here. It is to exercise, like, your freedom of speech, your autonomy, your, critical thinking, having difficult conversations, engaging even when you don't know that you can,
Yes.
trying to do away with shame. Like that is our agenda.
We're presenting these ideas.
Which for a lot of people, those are bad kind of things to engage with because it's like, oh, why bother? Like I have certainty in my religion, or I have certainty in like the political affiliations that I have, or
Yeah, I don't need to dig deeper or explore that more. Or, yeah.
my 2 children, my spouse, my paid off mortgage, or whatever. Like those things that give me the feeling of like solid ground, which all the more power to you. Then don't. I mean, we said that from the beginning. We're bad people. Don't engage unless you want to kind of explore expanding your mind a little bit, right? Which, again, I remember being a Christian and thinking, like, don't expand your mind. Like,
That's dangerous territory. That'll lead you to backslide or lose your faith.
yes, which, hey, there we are.
Right. Which is what I honestly would. I highly recommend Yuval's book. Like, even though I'm myself, I fully admit that I'm not finished it. But what I'm reading, it's like, it's very, very good for just clarifying how like information networks work.
Because you're reading Nexus, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And how the world constantly, and bureaucracy in particular, has to balance truth with order. And so these two opposing forces, truth and then order, like everyone being able to work and move like as a group, as a community, how those things are often at odds. And that is kind of the struggle globally all the time for like truth and order. And so is helping me understand like those tensions in new ways, where I'm like, it just gives me compassion too for people who are like, no, this has to be, you've got to have all these ducks in a row. But then also how truth can get lost in a lot of like our bureaucracies and our systems, and then we get very dependent on, like, we just love to swing to extremes.
I would say like truth takes time to uncover. It's
Harder.
expensive.
Yeah.
To
It's more messy.
mine out like what is true and what is a lie in some regard. And like, but it's also like there's like a flow. Like we would think of truth as being like, no, you can define it and it's rigid.
Just evident.
Exactly. But it's not, because like truth, again, depending on where you're seeing it from, like there is,
Or it can be very subjective.
which is like, I mean, I think of my personal experience. I just had a conversation with a dear friend last night who, like, for example, like a moral failure. And, so many people, this is a tricky one to engage with because nobody wants to be cheated on, obviously. That is an easy thing to go, like, that's a really shitty thing to do to people. How could you? Like, and you definitely get categorized in like the bad person kind of side of things. And then when I am honest about how it happened and kind of like, whoa, the nuance of everything, I'm like, and again, I don't want to romanticize affairs. That's not the point. But anybody who chooses to speak out on these things and to go like they're complicated and they happen, for one, so much more than we ever say they do. And for two, like, I don't know, like it's complicated and they happen for a reason. And I think like it's that the truth of how messy things really are, and like you want to take a stance that is always wrong, and how could people do that? And then you're like, shit, like, oh my, this happens. Yeah. And so that's like, I don't know, I think it's that, because it's easy to kind of stand on a soapbox and be like, you should never, we should
so
never.
Easy. Yeah. And it's also real easy just to have opinions on things that you have no real context or exposure to. Like,
and every time you do take a risk and talk about one of these more like hot topic kind of things, and then somebody might shame you for saying the wrong thing, and you're like, listen, like you need to speak up sometimes. And I think that's where, even to your question before of like, how do you know when, or how do you get your information, or how do you land on things or whatever, or when, because I would say I choose to speak up on things that you might not, based on my personal experience in things. And I'm like, well, no, I actually can stay silent on this. And I won't, because I I have experienced what is true and what actually happens when you don't check things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to just sit by and not say something.
Right. And at the same time, people are often saved from some heartbreak and horror in life because of other people's experience and yeah. So it's like being alive is a collaborative experience. And I think we just forget to I used to hear this phrase that like people are the reward and the challenge. And I feel like there's so much truth to that, especially as a parent. I'm like, my kids are my reward and my challenge. Like, that's the same with adults. Like we just I think it's nice. It would be nice if we could all have I don't know. I don't want to use the word maturity, but like you said in one of the posts you recently posted on Bad People, of just like can we be the adults? Like can we be big enough to like just I don't know, not behave in childish ways?
Especially in like our mid-30s and 40s, like we are the adults in the room. Like we're not, and sometimes I don't know why, but a lot of us feel like, oh shoot, like we don't have enough information to make a difficult decision or to do the right thing or whatever. And it's like, well, we are that, so we need to rise to the occasion.
Right. I think that's important to you and I to talk about like how do we do that? Like
Yeah, he's how.
just be adults. Which brings me as well to that podcast we both listened to recently, The Witch Trials, and you on your point about like the reality of how messy everything really is when you are brave enough to kind of examine it for what it is. That was a really good example, I think, of like there's two sides to every single story. There's a perspective from every like vantage point, and she gets into all of them kind of on that podcast and weighs them all up. And it's just not as easy as you think it is to come out with some sort of conclusion. Like,
I think it'd be great if we could do like maybe an episode on that podcast in particular, because it's so great. Like not only the person that put it together is fantastic, but that demonstrates so much around like a demonizing of people and kind of creating like this sensationalized like yeah, like
cancel culture. Yeah.
like making somebody stand for something that they definitely did not stand for, you know, like putting it again to that
All the
polarity.
assumptions that get made when you say certain things or
So definitely like for those, you guys, I think it even almost knocked Joe Rogan's podcast off, but it's called The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling. And Megan Phillips Roper, right, wrote the book Unfollow, which we both have read. Is that what it's called? Unfollowed? Yeah, which is so good. And
yeah, she's a very like curious thinker and has I'm getting a lot out of her kind of like approach at the moment to just engaging with ideas, good ideas and bad ideas, and just and her big thing is discourse, like having we can't sort of take the power out of bad ideas or figure out good ideas unless we're actually engaging with people about their ideas and why they hold those views and like so yeah, just really good. But I think also like if anyone listening has any if you guys have any feedback or input on like the things we've just discussed, like getting I don't know, dealing with the confusion of these times, how you get your sources or information and how you're kind of navigating it all. I mean, like that also would make us hugely happy to have like your input and feedback as well on what you're doing, because we do want to know. Like,
I know we do, like when we sit around and go out with girlfriends or, you know, have dinners and stuff, like a lot of people are right there experiencing the same thing.
right, we're all in it together.
Yeah, and everybody kind of feels the same way. So it is nice to kind of make in areas where we used to have more like formal gatherings and be able to kind of like collectively like cry out in some ways.
Yeah.
That I think why we are no longer is because that was very like scripted. Whereas now, like, I mean, you and I have talked about, well, what do we do? Like dinners a month, or should we have a gathering where we just like discuss ideas? Like if anybody is like, oh, I'd go to that, like shoot us a DM and maybe we could think about things like that further. But
Yeah.
again, like for this episode, I would say the challenge is like entertain some of the thoughts that make you feel uncomfortable. Some of the things that you push away that are like, that's too bad. It makes me feel too afraid. Or, yeah, like, and I think we've been conditioned to just go, like, I shouldn't engage with those things because they are bad and therefore don't need to worry about it. And I think that perpetuates, yeah, like a lack of looking at the truth in our own life and kind of uncovering and being curious about ourselves, right? Which is where it all starts.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us again, you guys. I think we're back to we have an old interview that we'll release in a few weeks after this one, and then hopefully on to some more, and then talking about some, more good hot topics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for being here. See you in a
Thank
couple
you.
weeks.
Bye.
Bye.